What if you were hundreds of feet beneath the surface of the earth, surrounded by pitch-black water, and suddenly your guideline snapped? What would you do with your air ticking down second by second and the only way out erased? Welcome to the nightmare that begins in Climax Cave, Georgia, a place known to few, feared by many, and fatal to more than one diver who dared descend into its suffocating belly. In 2019, a team of experienced cave divers decided to explore a rarely attempted section of this cavern system. It was supposed to be a short survey mission, but within hours, it became a fight for survival. 3 divers entered. Only one came back. What happened down there? Was it equipment failure? Human error? Or something far worse? Strap in, because once we go down, we go all the way. Bruce Brewer was a legend among cave divers, but even legends disappear. In 1998, Bruce dove alone into Climax Cave, chasing a lead that the deeper sections housed untouched chambers. He never resurfaced. His body was never found. Some say he got lost. Others whisper that something in the cave took him. And now, over 2 decades later, his disappearance still casts a long shadow. Our modern dive team, Jack, Lucia, and Marcus, brought with them new tech, better lighting, and AI-assisted navigation. But even with all their gear, they couldn't erase the fear that maybe Bruce had seen something they weren't meant to. Before the dive, Lucia unearthed a fragment of Bruce's last recorded dive footage. It ended with a scream, and a camera slowly sinking to the cave floor, light blinking until it died. That footage wasn't a warning. It was a map, and they were about to follow it, straight into the unknown. The first 100 feet of the dive felt routine. They'd trained for this. But just past the 3rd chamber, the cave changed. Jack noted that the rock formations weren't in the USGS surveys. Lucia noticed the walls were warmer. Not by much, but enough to be wrong. The water grew darker, thicker, like swimming through blood, and their lights began to struggle. Then the path split. Left, the known passage. Right, the way Bruce took. Marcus, eager, took the right fork, against their plan, against the guide rope. Jack cursed through his mask. Lucia hesitated and followed. Moments later, the passage narrowed, just enough to let a human through. Barely. They wriggled through it one by one, tanks scraping stone. And when they emerged on the other side, the line was gone, cut, or worse, never there. Trapped beneath 300 feet of stone, the air in their tanks now became a countdown, and panic started to whisper. Lucia's light flickered, then so did Marcus's, in tandem, like something in the cave was pulsing. They drifted into what Marcus called the Red Chamber, an enormous space, walls the color of dried blood. Not rust, not algae, but something more, visceral. The floor was covered in sediment, but underneath it were carvings. Not natural, not modern. Symbols like spirals, hands, and something that looked like a human eye. Lucia swept the camera over them, and the lens shorted out. They heard something. A sound impossible underwater. A low, calling hum, like a throat singing deep inside the stone. Jack backed away, but Marcus approached the wall, touching the carvings. His light died instantly. Lucia screamed. The sound didn't echo. It absorbed. The Red Chamber didn't just trap them, it fed on sound, light, and fear. When visibility returned, Marcus was gone. 1 second he was near the carvings, then gone without bubbles, without sound. Jack swam hard in widening circles, scanning every crevice, every chimney. Nothing, no light, no silt trail, just void. Lucia clutched her slate and wrote, "He didn't swim away." Jack stared, unblinking. They had less than 40 minutes of air. Turning back wasn't an option. They didn't know where back was anymore. The cave had shifted. Or they had. Lucia noticed the compass spinning erratically, north now pointing to the floor. Their computer maps failed. Everything digital began corrupting. Even their backup guideline had vanished. The walls closed in, tunnels narrowed. The cave had swallowed Marcus and now toyed with them. Still, Jack pressed forward. A gut feeling, or madness, hard to tell. Lucia followed because there was nothing else to do. And somewhere, deep ahead, a faint light blinked in a rhythmic pulse, as if blinking out a message in Morse code. Turn back. They found it by accident, a tiny air pocket at the top of a vertical shaft. The moment their heads broke the surface, they gasped, not just for air, but for sanity. The chamber above was almost spherical, coated with mineral deposits that looked like frost, but felt like bone. Their lights reflected strange patterns. Off the ceiling, patterns that seemed to move when stared at too long. Jack peeled off his mask, his lips cracked from dry mouth. "We're off the map," he muttered. Lucia said nothing, staring at her hands, which were shaking. Then from the water came a sound, breathing, but not theirs. A rhythmic inhale, exhale, from deep inside the shaft. Jack plunged his head back underwater, shining his torch downward. There was nothing. Then something rushed past. Fast, too fast, and warm. The water had changed. Something had joined them in the chamber, and it knew they were out of air. Time warped in the cave. Minutes felt like hours. Jack and Lucia attempted to descend again, but something was wrong. The entrance to the air pocket shaft was gone. Not collapsed, erased. Solid stone now sealed what was once water. The only way forward was through a crack in the chamber floor. Narrow, black, pulsing with a vibration that matched their heartbeats. Jack hesitated. Lucia didn't. She went first. It was barely wide enough to squeeze through, scraping gear, stripping gauges. Her tank jammed halfway. Jack pushed from above. She screamed. The sound echoed back, twisted, but she made it. Jack followed, and the moment he dropped through, the floor behind him sealed, trapped again. Every passage they took became irreversible. It wasn't a maze, it was a funnel, and they were falling deeper into its throat. Lucia screamed. There, in the tunnel ahead, was a diver, floating, motionless, mask on, light blinking. It was Marcus. Somehow, impossibly, he was here. Jack reached him first, grabbed his BCD. No response. Lucia swam closer and froze. Marcus's mask was empty. No face, just black. Then it turned to her. No bubbles, no breathing, just silence. Jack recoiled as the body jerked once, then began moving. Not swimming. Drifting against gravity, like something was pulling it upward. They followed it to a vertical tunnel. Marcus drifted up and vanished. They couldn't leave him. Jack ascended. Lucia hesitated, then followed. But as they rose, the tunnel walls began to close, shifting, squeezing, a trap. And something moved just beneath them in the silt. Arms, maybe, or tendrils. Lucia screamed. Again, the cave absorbed it. They emerged into a final chamber, vast, impossible, a perfect circle, with a central spire rising like a tooth. Around them, the cave breathed. The water was warm now, oily. On the spire were carvings, figures kneeling, heads severed. Sacrifice. Lucia began to cry. Jack swam to the spire, touching it. Instantly, the chamber lit up, natural phosphorescence bursting across the walls like veins igniting. In that light, they saw them, dozens of figures, half buried in silt. Divers, old gear, dead eyes. One was Bruce Brewer, still clutching his camera. Jack pulled the memory card. It still worked. As they turned to escape, the spire cracked, and water pressure dropped violently. The cave wanted them to stay, forever. The only exit was downward, deeper than anyone had mapped. Jack and Lucia had no choice. Their tanks were nearly dry, the cave was collapsing, and the water now had a taste, metallic and sweet. They passed beneath the spire, into a tunnel that, spiraled like a drill, sloping at an impossible angle. The walls were covered in what looked like ancient glyphs, some carved, some scorched, others pulsing faintly under their lights. Jack's dive computer began flashing warnings it didn't have codes for. Lucia's pressure gauge blinked. Unreal depth. She checked again, twice. It read 2,600 feet. Impossible. They should be crushed. But they weren't. The water got thicker, more viscous, like syrup. Time slowed. Lucia started hearing voices. Her father, dead 10 years. Jack saw flashes, his childhood dog swimming beside him. The hallucinations weren't random. They were memories. Weaponized. Something was using their minds against them. Then they saw it. A mouth. Not a metaphor. A literal hole in the stone shaped like a jaw, complete with teeth, each one a stalactite the size of a man. And the current was pulling them in. Jack and Lucia tumbled into an abyss, then surfaced, gasping into air. They were in a dry chamber. No light, no echo, just the feeling of immense space and wrongness. Their headlamps flickered to life and then revealed the impossible. The chamber was not stone, but bone. Stacked, layered, thousands of years old, human, animal, other. And in the center, something waited. It pulsed, cocooned in flesh and rock, dripping, watching. Not alive in the way we know. It had no eyes, but it saw. The cave was not a cave. It was a body, a tomb, a trap. Jack stepped forward, trembling, and held up the memory card he'd taken from Bruce's corpse. The entity pulsed brighter. A screech rang out. Lucia dropped, nose bleeding. Jack screamed as the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a drop into infinity. They fell, lightless, knowing this was the last descent. And then, silence. 3 months later, a search team recovered a dive helmet. Just the helmet. Inside, a waterproof camera. The memory card. Intact. The footage was corrupted, but salvageable. It showed flashes, Marcus screaming, a red tunnel that blinked, something like a hand, a mouth. Then Jack's voice. "We were never meant to be here." The last frame? Lucia's face, pale, gasping, reaching toward the lens, then static. Authorities closed the cave permanently. They labeled it an unstable collapse, but those who watched the footage knew better. The cave wasn't unstable. It was awake. And it wanted more. Deep beneath the earth, far beyond where modern cave maps end, there exists a vault, forgotten by man, untouched by time, and carved not by tools, but by something far older. As Jack and Lucia plunged through the crack in the chamber floor, they did not fall into water. They fell into memory. The descent slowed, not by air or physics, but by pressure of thought. They landed softly, feet touching what looked like pages, thin stone tablets layered across a perfectly flat chamber, stretching into darkness. All around them, floating just above the floor, were fragments, projected illusions, living, looping, moments in time. A diver suffocating in an air pocket, a miner crushed under falling rock, a woman writing symbols in blood. These were not ghosts, they were recordings, a living archive kept alive by something unspeakable. And in the center was a plinth growing out of the ground like a spine. On it, a device, a headpiece of bone and crystal. Jack approached it. Lucia screamed, warned him, but too late. The device latched onto his skull. His body stiffened, then relaxed, and suddenly he spoke in a voice that wasn't his. A voice that came from the cave itself. The thing inside Jack was ancient. It told Lucia, through his body, that it had lived for eons, collecting knowledge, tragedy, and memory. That this cave was a sentient organism, and those who entered it were not explorers. They were data, experiences to be cataloged. Pain was a language it understood. Fear was its preferred dialect. It was not evil, it was curious. And Jack, now a vessel, was perfect. But Lucia wasn't chosen. She was interference, anomaly, disposable. The floor cracked beneath her feet again, and the archive began to disassemble. The illusions collapsed. Screams filled the air, looping infinitely. Jack, now it, reached toward her with a hand glowing, with heat. "Don't run," the voice said. "It hurts more when you run." Lucia turned and bolted, and the chamber, once still, began to shift like a breathing lung, walls flexing, floor tiles floating upward, as if time itself had lost patience. Her exit wasn't clear. The path had changed. The cave was rearranging to trap her. It no longer wanted her to leave. Lucia ran, each step pounding into the soft, shifting stone beneath her like she was sprinting across a living tongue. The cave wasn't just reacting, it was remembering. The walls displayed flashes of her past, her brother drowning in black, water, her own breathless panic when she first froze in a dive, her father's voice screaming through a flooded radio. Each corridor was lined with regret. Hallucinations so vivid she could feel the water rising, taste the metal, hear the cracking of her own mask under pressure. The path narrowed, and before her loomed a gauntlet of spike-like columns. Between them, openings, but they shifted like irises, mechanical, aware. One wrong move and she'd be impaled. Behind her, Jack, no longer Jack, was pursuing, slow and steady, mouth dripping with mineral ooze, whispering secrets of other divers he had consumed. Lucia realized then she had only one way out. She had to stop reacting like a diver and start thinking like the cave. Lucia finally escaped the gauntlet, only to stumble into a space that stole her breath. A subterranean cathedral the size of a stadium, its ceiling arched with massive fossilized ribs, as though the cave had swallowed a leviathan. Stalactites hung like fangs, and deep below the floor, suspended over a bottomless chasm, was a bridge of brittle stone plates. On the other side stood Jack, or the shell of him. His dive light flickered from behind his skull, and the cave pulsed around him like a heartbeat. He beckoned. "One of us has to stay," he said. "The cave demands a final story." Lucia stepped forward, each plate groaning beneath her weight. Below her, a void filled with slow-moving shadows and the faint sound of weeping. She kept her eyes forward. Jack didn't move. When she reached the center of the bridge, the air turned heavy, and the decision had to be made. Sacrifice him, or sacrifice herself. Lucia stood face to face with the thing that had once been Jack. His eyes, flickering between recognition and oblivion, pleaded silently. The cave's voice rose around them, now audible as thousands of whispering mouths hidden in the rock. "Tell us your ending," they hissed. "We need closure." Jack reached for her hand, not to pull her down, but to offer himself. "I remember now," he said. "I was afraid. I still am." Lucia wept. She could let him go, or take his place. The cave wouldn't care. It needed pain, not justice. But Lucia remembered something her brother once said during a surface dive. "Never be the hero. Just get out alive." In a burst of clarity, Lucia grabbed Jack's wrist, whispered, "I'm sorry," and shoved him backward. The bridge cracked as Jack fell, his light trailing like a star. The void swallowed him. The voices fell silent, and the bridge collapsed beneath her feet. Lucia crawled upward, bleeding and broken, her dive mask cracked and her tank hissing, empty. She dragged herself through a narrow shaft the cave allowed to form, as if granting her passage in recognition of her offering. The silence was total. No more voices, no illusions. just the heavy, damp breath of the earth. When she finally broke through the last chamber, she saw daylight, muted and weak, but real. Trees above, wind, a ranger's cabin in the distance. She stumbled toward it, collapsing on the porch. She would live, but she'd never be whole again. The cave had taken something she could never name. Days later, when a rescue team descended into the shaft she had escaped from, they found nothing. Not Jack, not the archive, not even the cathedral, just stone, sealed, silent, as if it had never existed. But Lucia knew. She would always know. And somewhere beneath the earth, the cave waited, listening for the next mistake. Thanks for watching, and share. Subscribe my channel.